G'day and welcome back to Critical AFL on YouTube. Today is the first look at draft and trade content on this channel with an extremely early look into the possible off-season activity from the West Coast Eagles. So for today's analysis, I'll be covering trade rumours and our current targets, which will include just a player profile of those targets, the possible cost to us, whether it either is draft capital or salary cap space and money in general, and then the likelihood of those trade targets as the rumours currently stand on them. Then I'll put forward the indicative draft order as it is right now, and then our plausible draft targets with our picks in the first round from there. Before finally, I'll give an overview at the change in our list profile between 2025 and 26 based on this current analysis and where I think that's likely to leave us as a club. So to start off, I've decided just to list the trade rumours in order of most significant rather than most likely, just because it's probably a little bit early in the season to be trying to say who's more likely than not. So at the top of that list is Darcy Cameron being the most significant. He's currently contracted at Collingwood to the end of 2026. He's been on that deal for a couple of years. It's pretty much considered to be unders, meaning he's really outperformed since he signed that contract, which I think is where some of this is being generated. He's 30 years old at the moment, so that alone would probably go a long way in protecting us from having to put forward, like a war chest of draft capital to bring him across. Even though he is currently rated just in that top tier of rucks in the competition this year. He's 204 centimetres, one of the strong-bodied rucks of the competition, as opposed to the leaping rucks like we have with Nat Nui and Bailey Williams, or, the ground-level stars like your Luke Jackson types. Or even I think you'd probably say that Tim English fits that profile as well for someone who racks up possessions across the field, not just with the ruck taps. So he's pretty perfectly in the frame for the modern ruck profile. But more importantly, he would be filling one of the biggest deficiencies that we have at the moment on our list. This year, our rucks have competed admirably, is probably my best description. Matt Flynn has the size and weight of the primary ruck role, probably not quite the muscle definition, but has probably been a tier below that top tier of rucks in the comp that has really forced our hand with playing both him and Bailey Williams in the same squad just to break even or to try and mitigate some of the damage that, your Max Gorns and Tristan Sherrys of the competition can do. And we saw when we didn't put both those guys in the damage that, the likes of Jared Witts and Oscar McInerney did to us when it went really badly. So to be honest, the primary rucks of more than half the comp right now are really impressive these days. So there just isn't much room for a club to be going all season without one of those top tier rucks themselves. The rumours of West Coast targeting Darcy Cameron have been running all year, as recently as yesterday. He's West Australian, he's from Albany, he grew up an Eagles fan, and there's no question over the fact that West Coast are actually trying to bring him across as well. So we're not making this stuff up. It's been continually pursued by the club. So it really just comes down to whether he makes a trade request and then if Collingwood are prepared to release him from whatever, I suppose he's got left on his contract with that 1 year in exchange for whatever capital we're prepared to offer, which that could end up being a sticking point since they're still a premiership contender this year and probably think they are next year as well. What I do here is that with a year left on his current contract, and like I mentioned, that previous year of being paid less than his value, that he isn't particularly attached to Collingwood Football Club. So at his end, I think there's a good chance of us convincing him. Like I said, it'd just be the club more that would be the sticking point possibly. My final prediction on Darcy Cameron, and you'll have to take these early predictions with a grain of salt. It is July by 1 day. I think the chance is probably around 60% that he gets across to West Coast. And if he does, it would ideally be achieved without us using our first 3 picks, which, like I'll cover later, they're pick 1, 2, and then Hawthorn's first rounder. The 2 is obviously speculative, but highly likely. Earlier today, though, actually just before I started making this video, Andrew McWalter did announce that West Coast has made an application for assistance to the AFL. So something like an end of first round priority pick could be perfect to fit a package of that and maybe some later picks to hopefully get that deal done if it is going to happen. The next big trade rumour attached to West Coast is Brandon Starcevic at Brisbane. He's 26 and another West Australian, by the way, which really seems to just be the trend these days when you look at trade targets. And most importantly, he's a restricted free agent, which we've done pretty well with in the last couple of years. As far as our list fit goes, Starcevic is a really accountable and classy rebounding halfback, which is again something we need at West Coast. It's not quite the deficiency as our ruck or our senior midfielder gaps, but there is a gap there, which can be improved by someone in the upper end of experience and talent, which is where I rate Starcevic. The best example I can give of where I think that position at West Coast is currently at is just to describe the fact that Liam Baker's been thrown across half back, half forward, and then midfield. And I'm pretty sure Mick Walter actually even said as recently as this week that he could do with 3 Liam Bakers because he's so good at all those positions and we're not perfectly set in any of them. So while I said halfback is a position where we have senior players already available, that does show a need for someone of Starcevic's calibre to move in and improve our best 23. Like I mentioned, he's a restricted free agent. So unlike Darcy Cameron, we wouldn't have to give up draft capital, just salary cap space, which we do have a lot of at the moment. And then when you look at the talent on Brisbane's list, they're probably not in a position to be matching that if we can offer it to him. So it's really a case of can we convince him? It's kind of funny because Brisbane seems to be a club we've had the most success with on the trade front in the last few years, or longer than that probably. We brought, I think, Redden and Yo in both, who have outperformed those trades back in the day. And at the moment, it also looks like we'll be a good chance to get Starcevic in for free and Oscar Allen converted into pick 2 at the end of this year's draft, which I would call a win. So all in all, I think we could be set to keep up our healthy relationship with the Brisbane Lions at the end of year if we do pick him up. My current guess would probably be just over 50% likely that we do get Brandon Starcevic in Eagles colours next year. So outside of those 2 prominent rumours for trade targets, there will almost certainly be other players that move, but probably not quite the same tier of star power and noise just at this point of the year. But just to cover some of the whispers I've heard that we've shown interest in, I think that Elijah Tsatas, the former top 5 pick, has been left out in the cold at Essendon, and he could be a steal in our midfield given some opportunity. So there has been whispers that we've got interest in him. Also Neil Erasmus, similarly to Tsatas, he's a top 10 pick midfielder, and he's not getting much opportunity in the Dockers midfield, and we have been linked there, or at least shown some interest. While Devon Robinson's value is probably at an all-time low, being completely squeezed out of Brisbane's highly talented 23 all year. He did pass on a trade to us not so long ago, but unfortunately just for him, things have changed really badly for his position at Brisbane since. So now that we've covered the trade element of this deep dive, let's now take a look at how we might handle going to the draft. So to begin with, our current draft hand, like I mentioned earlier, will very likely be pick 1 for what's now guaranteed to be our ladder position going into the draft, the wooden spoon. Pick 2 as band 1 compensation for a highly likely free agency move by Oscar Allen to Brisbane. I think if you wanted me to put a percentage likelihood on Allen making that move and then the compensation being band 1, so both those together, I'd be pretty confident in saying it's probably close to 95% that both of those things come about. And then Hawthorn's first round pick, which could fall anywhere between pick 10 and 18. I think there's a decent chance it could be pick 10 looking at the ladder predictor. They've got a pretty tough run home, and one of those sides has to be pushed out of the 8. So they're probably one of 3 that could be that team. But either way, that pick's going to slide significantly anyway once bids start rolling on draft night. So it won't be that number. That's just going to be a starting point, and then you could probably go +5, to be honest. And then we have our own second round pick after that. Again, that's supposedly pick 19, but then even if you look at our compensation pick for Oscar Allen, it's already pick 20, and then you add a handful of first round match bids for all the academies. So that would land around 30, again, just like last year's did. We then have Hawthorn's second round pick, which is a bit further down, and then Hawthorn's third round pick, which, unlike in the first round, is probably more likely to shorten back the other way. I couldn't tell you a number, but it'll probably actually come in down the draft order when all the matching bids disappear from later in the draft when they use those picks, if that makes sense. We actually don't have our own third round pick because that was part of that trade with Hawthorn. So excluding a possible priority pick and our later picks, I'm just going to focus on those first 3 picks in the first round for 2 reasons. One, because it's impossible to gauge who your club will get beyond the first round. The domino effect becomes one of those maths equations of 20 to the power of 10, basically. It's a bit like lotto, because every player, every time you go further down the draft, more clubs could grab someone, and then it just gets out of control. So then the other reason is probably because we're probably going to use some of those later picks as trade capital as well. So there's just no use trying to figure out what we're going to do with picks we may or may not have with players that may not be on that draft board at that point. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and say that with pick 1, I still think West Coast is a very good chance to take Cooper Duff-Tyler. He's a 200-centimetre ruckman who plays like a midfielder. And essentially, rather than trying to get too deep into trying to describe him, I think the easiest thing would be to picture him in the mould of like Luke Jackson. So with a bit of luck, he won't be done growing. 200 centimetres is not where he finishes off. And if we do manage to pick up a 30-year-old Darcy Cameron, then it would actually create the perfect succession plan for us to ensure we never find ourselves in the position that we've experienced over the last 3 years with our rucks, with Nat Nui being constantly injured and then really no one in that top tier coming through to replace him. Anyway, with pick 2, I think we pick up Dyson Sharp or possibly Willem Dersma. I've heard rumours already that we're entertaining the idea of splitting this pick. And while I think that the pick splits over the last 2 years have actually worked out pretty well for us. So first we got Ruben Jinby and Elijah Hewitt with our first pick split. Then last year we got essentially Liam Baker and Bo Allen. I have to state though this year explicitly, I think we'd be nuts to do it a third time. For starters, our timing to have those 2 picks that high is a miracle because unlike other drafts, the pick slide beyond pick 5 will be massive. Just looking at all the guys that are at the top end of the draft this year and who they're tied to, the match bids are going to push anyone out of the top 5 really quickly. So we're lucky to be on the other side of that. Also, I think we did need a volume of good talent up until now. So we're probably at the stage where it's time to grab the best quality rather than an abundance of good young talent like we have before. Anyway, either Sharp or Dersma would be picking up A-grade midfield talent that are both capable of impacting our side in their first year. Personally, I'd love to see us pick Dyson Sharp at this stage. He's an inside bull who accumulates really good numbers as well, which we desperately need, and already really highly rated for his defensive pressure. So that's pretty much a perfect fit for our current weaknesses. And I think he could be in the side really early next year, making an impact. Anyway, thirdly comes Hawthorn's first rounder. Like I said, this could sit anywhere from picks 10 to 18 going into the draft, and then it will certainly slide a handful of picks further with all the academy bids. Just quickly on that, before I digress too hard, I do want to point out that there's a lot of people that hate the academy access at the moment, especially other clubs, like the hierarchy of other clubs rather than fans. I'm not really one of them. I think when you look at the majority of these guys and where they're coming from, they probably wouldn't even make it into the system without the Northern Academies. So it's more an advantage to clubs from those areas than it's a disadvantage to the rest of us. And that's something I'm fine with because I quite like those clubs anyway. But like I said, with this pick, we could target anything from local WA midfield talent like Fred Rodriguez or even Jacob Farrow, just since WA players do tend to get overlooked across the country and slide. In fact, if I'm being honest, I think that fact is probably why West Coast split picks so many times in the past. But otherwise, we could even go for the best available key defender, someone like Harry Dean, since that is the part of the ground that we do need to invest in pretty soon, with a few of the guys that have come out recently being Barras and now Gov's retirement. I think it wouldn't hurt for us to actually go to the draft with those. Personally, I think my ability to accurately guess what we're going to do with this pick is really low. So especially this far away from the trade and draft periods where all the picks and rumours start to firm up. But that pretty much does still wrap up my very early coverage of what I think will be another really exciting trade and draft period for us especially. In conclusion, if the first 2 predictions for both the trades and the drafts go the way that I've predicted, so Darcy Cameron, Starcevic, Cooper Duff-Tyler, Dyson Sharp, then I think West Coast fans can probably expect a really big leap in the performance of the side next year. Just looking at our list this year, we've already been playing without Gov and Allen, while Yo and Waterman should be back in the side for round one. I'm sure there's scepticism over Yo, but I'd say he will. The ruck would go from being the most vulnerable to elite, with Darcy Cameron replacing our current setup. And all of that talent that I've been focusing on in my week-to-week reviews this year will go from being, I think, young guys that are thrown in the deep end to guys that are really starting to impose themselves on the competition consistently rather than, showing their talent every now and then. So I do hope everyone's enjoyed this early trade and draft preview. It is a really long way out, so I don't think I'm going to go out on a limb too hard if some of these predictions change as we get closer. But I'm looking forward to updating this coverage every few weeks, hopefully, as we get closer to that final ladder position and more information about player movement starts to creep out. So thanks again, and cheers until next time.